Hello ladies and gents, this is another video from Navy Decoded. I really like this channel. I like the way he thinks. I like the way he's talks about science, geometrical, mathematics, this and that. This is one of the latest video, why the US Navy needed time on target to erase Iran's fleet. Yeah, if you don't know this channel, go to original video page link and from there support this channel. Yeah, this channel sometimes gets nearly 1 million views, sometimes not even 10-15,000. It's a weird variation. I feel like algorithm is messing it up or something. If you like this, I'm not gonna be able to react to all videos from this channel. So if you like this type of videos, go to original page link and from there support it. And yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Let's do this one.
In modern multi-domain warfare, a nation's greatest vulnerability isn't found on the battlefield. It is the fatal arrogance built into its own strategic architecture. Look at the first 48 hours of Operation Epic Fury. Dropping thousands of tons of kinetic payload onto a grid over 1,000 nautical miles away is never an act of impulse.
That's a Dorito.
It is an industrial execution. You are taking strings of 2,000-pound precision penetrators from high altitudes and cruise missiles from beneath the waves. You are launching them from entirely disjointed spatial vectors, altitudes, and airspeeds, and you are forcing them to violently converge.
You're also using B-1 Lancers to throw more cruise missiles, apart from Tomahawks.
On the regime's nerve center, at the exact same absolute millisecond. That doesn't take rage. It takes something infinitely colder. It requires the absolute unforgiving doctrine of time on target. And into that ruthless kinetic system, the enemy voluntarily fed a suicidal parameter. Why did the IRGC willingly surrender their most expensive, highly touted combat ecosystem into a claustrophobic inner harbor? Why did they expose the massive radar cross-section of their entire surface fleet right under the nose of the United States global sensor grid? To their supreme leadership, it looked like a stronghold. But through the eyes of an American military architect, that wasn't a concentration of power. That was an adversary, permanently locking their own fleet into an inescapable geometric trap. Bandar Abbas was never a fortress. To us, it was purely a target-rich environment, a kinetic reality where the final output is always the same: erasure. The coordinate grid was locked. The execution protocol was fed into the kill chain. If you want to witness exactly how the American industrial war machine surgically dismantled this defensive ecosystem using uncompromising systems design and overwhelming kinetic force, hit the subscribe button to synchronize your data. Welcome to Navy Decoded. But before we can break down the lethal anatomy of this kill chain, we first have to understand the physical iron cage where this trap was actually sprung. The greatest enemy of the US military in this multi-domain campaign wasn't Iran's Bayvar 373 air defense system, nor was it Russian-supplied S-400 batteries. The enemy was space. The enemy was the limit of geography. The distance to reach the core targets was a lethal logistics and combat radius problem, spanning roughly 800 to 1,075 nautical miles. Our machine doesn't need to close the distance to engage. The kinetic payload was released from the furthest edges of the physical map. From the supercarrier USS Gerald R. Ford, growling in the eastern Mediterranean. From the USS Abraham Lincoln carrier strike group, holding the line out in the Arabian Sea. And from remote strategic bases in Diego Garcia and Cyprus, to decapitate the nerve center of the Iranian Navy at Bandar Abbas. The precision-guided munitions network had to tear through thousands of nautical miles of contested airspace. And the center of that geographical iron cage is the Strait of Hormuz, a mere 21 nautical miles wide at its choke point. Yet,
did they use Diego Garcia for things to do? I never heard of that. That's interesting. So I thought you're gonna use some bases from Iraq or what is it, Jordan or something, right? I mean, it's interesting if you use maybe B-1 Lancers, because it can't be B-2s, right? B-2s always fly from mainland America, as far as I know. So, yeah.
it is the jugular, pumping 20% of the world's crude oil and LNG into the global economic bloodstream. Sitting right on the southern coast along this narrow strip of water is the Bandar Abbas Naval Base. It's not just a base, it is the nerve center of their heavy surface fleet, and IRGCN swarms, holding Bandar Abbas. Iran held a geopolitical blade right at the global energy artery, ready to suffocate the Western supply chain. However, their strategic thinking had completely rotted from complacency. Instead of leveraging the vastness of the ocean to disperse their strength, they blindly worshipped the doctrine of exquisite platforms. They voluntarily compressed their entire combat ecosystem into a shallow basin and claustrophobic dry docks. The backbone of their surface force, the Maj-class frigates, were entirely stripped of their maneuvering space. Their stealth deterrents beneath the waves. The Kilo-class diesel-electric attack subs were forced to expose their fatal vulnerabilities right on the hard stand. Even their ambitious blue water floating cities.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second. Oh, here you go. Submarine comparison. Russia, Varshavyanka. This is basically Kilo submarine but slightly modern. Same thing. 239 feet, about the same size. Here's the size of that thing, right here in the center. Alright, let's speed it up. US, Soviet Union, let's speed it up even more. More. Even more. There's a Los Angeles. Ohio. The nuclear power, right? Where did that one go? Virginia. Must be here somewhere. Oh, there you go. There's a Virginia right there. 374 feet. Right? So this Kilo class is going to compete with one of the most powerful one of them all. It's going to stop here. Yeah. So the Kilo class cannot even come close to the size of Virginia or any other ones. Not even close to Ohio. Basically the most modern shit there is. Even though there are two Russian ones that are bigger, it's like, let's just use the measuring tape type of mentality. Look, you can clearly see the difference between Russian, Soviet, and Ohio class. Yeah, and Kilo class is, yeah, that's a submarine. Yeah, that's something to be afraid of. Really?
Like the 133,000 short-ton Expeditionary Sea Base IRIS Macron, or the UAV carrier IRIS Shahid Bagheri, were deadlocked in a tight pier-side geometry. They weren't massing combat power, they were creating a physical saturation point. All of their most expensive war machines turned themselves into silent steel blocks lying dormant, turning this entire basin into a massive electromagnetic bullseye. That is exactly why, through the eyes of the radar cross-section analysts at CENTCOM, Bandar Abbas was no longer a fortress. It was a target-rich environment, an invitation for annihilation. The coordinate grid was set, the death sentence was pronounced. The mainstream media always wonders why Iran's boasted integrated air defense system went completely silent, failing to understand that the sheer overmatch in multi-domain warfare gives the adversary zero chance to react.
I wonder why did our defenses didn't work against aliens? Oh, gee, I wonder what could it be. How your defense is gonna work against America? That one plane is enough to jam shit, not just jam, confuse them. Oh, there are 50 F-35s coming. I don't see it. Yeah, because it's not there. It's decoys. Growler is confusing you. That's just one system. Viruses, malicious, attacks, satellite attacks, blackouts, you name it. CIA going ape shit somehow. Yeah, this is not even close to be a competition.
We don't use raw muscle to break down the enemy's front door. Instead, we reshape the entire physical environment around them. We initiate the kill chain not with a kinetic boom, but by ruthlessly exploiting systemic fragility. At exactly 09:45 hours local Tehran time, as the timeline hit zero, a multi-tiered cyber campaign was dropped straight from orbit into the enemy's core data infrastructure, throttling their national bandwidth and forcing transmission capacity into a free fall down to roughly 1%. For the systems engineers controlling the US battle network, this forced civilian bottleneck was explicitly designed to trigger an irreversible cascading failure on a much deeper military level. Because once civilian infrastructure collapsed, desperate traffic instantly spilled over and overloaded all military backup bands, creating a fatal physical fracture that severed the vital command and control nodes from central Tehran all the way down to the naval commanders stationed in Bandar Abbas.
Whoa!
When air traffic control screens drowned in lethal white noise and locked out all data streams, the OODA loop of the IRGC top brass was thrown straight off a cliff into total paralysis. Not a single fleet dispersal order was issued. Not a single propeller shaft had time to spool up and escape.
America isn't just playing in different league. America is playing completely different sport at this point.
The entire fleet was automatically stripped of its maneuverability and locked in place within an incredibly tight pier geometry. That is the ruthless law of modern warfare. When the central brain is blinded and clinically dead, no matter how great the steel muscle is, it becomes nothing more than a silent kinetic target waiting to be vaporized. At the exact moment the enemy's nervous system was convulsing in total disconnect, the second kinetic trap was sprung. The US flooded the airspace with hundreds of ADM-160 MALD miniature electronic decoys, combined with swarms of low-cost Lucas kamikaze drones, generating a data tsunami to overwhelm the processing capacity of every early warning radar site. This wasn't standard misdirection. This was physics manipulation at a subatomic level. The ADM-160 MALDs carry no explosives. Their weapon is pure mathematical deception. The signature augmentation subsystem inside the core of each MALD operates like a reality-bending machine, emitting sophisticated electromagnetic signatures to amplify the radar cross-section of a mere 300-pound object into the massive digital...
Or we have stealth things that reduce the cross-section. We have amplifiers as well that increases the subsection when we want it to look like a fucking plane. Yeah, manipulates that whole another level.
Footprint of a B-52 strategic bomber or an F-15E Strike Eagle. For the Iranian radar operators staring desperately at their scopes in sheer panic, the algorithm had perfectly cloned a massive incoming fleet, painting phantom squadrons of F-15 and F-16 screaming at high subsonic speeds straight toward Tehran's airspace. By injecting this massive volume of spoofed data directly into the veins of their air defense network, we forced their fire control computers to solve meaningless equations, completely overflowing their sensor buffers and permanently stripping the system of its target discrimination capabilities. We hijacked their attention, forcing SAM batteries to frantically fire at electromagnetic ghosts, draining their multi-million-dollar interceptor missiles into the empty void. Once highly touted billion-dollar air defense complexes like the Bavar 373 and S-400 were overwhelmed and neutralized by the laws of electromagnetic waves, the system's defensive perimeter was systematically disassembled. The fifth-generation stealth assassins, F-35s and F-22 Raptors, operating under the absolute protection of a broad-spectrum electronic warfare dome generated by EA-18G Growlers, methodically tore open the target airspace without leaving a single ripple on the radar scopes. At this point, Iran's defensive net wasn't just overpowered by brute force, it was being disassembled by our system in the most calculated, surgical, and cold-blooded manner possible. When the adversary's sensor grid was completely blinded and deafened by the electromagnetic storm, the industrial delivery machine began the process of pulverizing their physical infrastructure. The tempo of the kill chain was instantly pushed to its absolute limit. As the volume of ordnance dropped, surged by 1,260%. This marked the convergence of an absolute logistics air bridge. The system spooled up over 1,500 total sorties, heavily front-loaded with aerial refuelers, AWACS, and electronic warfare nodes, to enable a kinetic spearhead of just 400 dedicated strike platforms, raining down over 4,000 smart munitions. The objective defined by the system wasn't just a simple victory, it was absolute strategic paralysis within a 48-hour lethal window, where the synchronization of the time-on-target equation operated like a death clock that could not deviate by a single millisecond. The opening wave possessed no epic flair. It was a mechanical data output process. Everything started with a few kilobytes of encrypted command strings, transmitted straight down to the Mark 41 VLS cells on Arleigh Burke-class destroyers holding the line in the Persian Gulf. Absolutely no battle cries or warnings, just electromagnetic relays closing circuits and solid fuel ignition systems activated. Dozens of BGM-109 Tomahawks cleared the launch tubes via pure mechanical thrust. But these machines didn't arc into the stratosphere to broadcast their trajectory vectors. The moment they cleared the deck, the radar altimeter algorithms ruthlessly hijacked the flight controls, pitching tons of metal down to subsonic speeds and forcing the systems into a sea-skimming flight profile, holding the Turcom navigation.
Now I understand why didn't they use planes and use just Tomahawks from destroyers. One of the reasons is they didn't want to use planes because a lot of jamming fuckery was happening, and like how it happened with F-15s, how friendly fire shot them down. They didn't want to risk that with this one. So better use Tomahawks with the insane amount of multiple system for targeting. So these Tomahawks can get screwed by this type of, like overwhelming jamming waves, right? Because it uses more than that.
Offline until they crossed the coastline. This flight path was a geometry problem the computers had already solved before launch, by skimming just a few feet above the deck, right under the radar horizon. This kinetic net slipped through every...
Yeah, there's a video of a Tomahawk passing by. Wait a minute. Oh, there you go. Dramatic footage captured the moment US Tomahawk flight past crew on an Iranian... The people say it's not Iranian one. Yeah, it doesn't matter which ship it is. But yeah, look at that. Look at it, just going like it's a plane, just basically cruise missile with an engine, no afterburner, nothing, because it's not a fucking rocket, it's a cruise missile. People like, shit. If you can hear it and see it, which means you're not the target. That's what it is. This is awesome.
Blind spot in the electromagnetic spectrum. They didn't rely on radar-absorbent materials for stealth. They gained stealth by exploiting the curvature of the Earth to blind the enemy's early warning footprints. The moment the fuses locked onto the coordinates, there was no battlefield rage, only the absolute release of kinetic energy according to the laws of physics. The 1,000-pound penetrator warheads transferred their energy. They erased the early warning antenna arrays and ground the reinforced concrete structures of the frontline C2 routing nodes into mechanical dust. You have to understand this parameter. In CENTCOM's blueprint, the vaporization of the fleet at Bandar Abbas was never the variable assigned to the opening wave. These Tomahawks were purely a mechanical scalpel, a physical clearing tool, coldly carving open the magnetic cage to establish mathematically perfect, safe flight corridors for the heavy kinetic payload screaming in right behind them.
I like how he says that. It makes me think, none of this was ever a challenge. It was just paperwork. It was just like which list to go first. Okay, we are doing this, then we are doing this, and we're doing this. Oh, look at that. All of the job done. We have air superiority now.
About 30 minutes
Navy
after the
superiority, air
Tomahawk
superiority, all
wave
of it.
finished punching through the defensive cage, a sterile, spatial corridor where resistance was reduced to absolute zero was opened. And that is when the American logistics machine pumped the full kinetic payload into the coordinate grid, from altitudes far beyond interception limits. B-2 Spirit strategic bomber platforms launching from the continental U.S. initiated the freefall sequence of precision strings of 2,000-pound GBU-31 V3 JDAMs. Their massive kinetic energy slammed down, shattering the structural integrity of hardened launch pads and totally obliterating submarine pens. But within the architecture of network lethality, no single machine operates as an independent entity. The B-2 Spirit carries a massive mechanical payload, but it is just the sledgehammer. The true brain of the equation lies in the sensor fusion layer operating right below. The F-15E, F-22, F-35, and EA-18G platforms were synchronized into a single, unified computational beast. It started with electromagnetic suppression. Under the radiation dome cast by the EA-18G Growlers, the enemy's electromagnetic spectrum was jammed and entirely locked down. Exploiting that blind spot, 5th generation F-22 and F-35 stealth assets casually slipped through the air defense net. They didn't fire blindly, they acted as forward sensor nodes. Their algorithms silently scanned via synthetic aperture radar, gathered electro-optical signatures, and instantly uploaded coordinates to a secure data link.
Yeah, F-22s were used like that. They were in the air, went past Iran. It's like, I wonder what it's there, mark it down, and went back on. When none of the system touched them. That's just another level of badassery. You're this like properly like armed to the gills powerhouse fighter plane. You didn't even need to do any of that. You just like looking at things and gathering intelligence, right? That's some next level shit.
Link in real time. Trailing behind them, the F-15E Strike Eagle bomb trucks didn't even need to power on their own radars to scan. Emitting RF means exposing your position. Instead, they flew in complete electromagnetic silence, receiving parameters straight from the F-35s and F-22s. Any mobile enemy radar that dared to peek out of a valley was instantly locked into the shared grid. The F-35 detected and designated. The F-15E acted as the execution node, dropping precision 2,000-pound class JDAMs onto the decrypted parameters. It was a perfectly closed loop of data to kinetic energy. The only vulnerability in a collapsing defensive structure is the desperate attempt to reboot early warning radars. But in this kill web, any attempt to feed power into a transmitter automatically triggered a secondary kill chain. Loitering offshore, FA-18 Super Hornet platforms didn't fly into the jamming zone. They operated as passive launch rails. The exact second an enemy antenna emitted an RF signal into the environment, that parameter was caught, cross-processed over the data link, and given an automatic vector lock. The emitter was erased before the radar operator's screen could even compile a single byte of data. This massive flow of data, from the F-35's optical targeting, the Growlers' jamming bands, right down to the Super Hornet's ballistic vectors, was routed, filtered, and bandwidth allocated through a central flying server. The E-2D Hawkeye Airborne Battle Management Node, and this is the most ruthless nature of networked lethality. The system doesn't rely on traditional numerical superiority. It is governed by the equation of absolute time synchronization. This machine unleashes firepower from entirely disjointed physical spaces. Subs on the ocean floor, destroyers on the surface, strategic flying fortresses in the stratosphere, and stealth fighters weaving through the clouds. Every platform releases its payload, from entirely out-of-phase orbital vectors, aerodynamic speeds, and altitudes. Yet, CENTCOM's multi-domain guidance algorithm manipulated all of that spatial chaos, bending it into an agonizingly strict temporal order. Thousands of kinetic blocks were forced to converge, punching through the atmosphere and physically impacting the Bandar Abbas coordinate grid at the exact same absolute millisecond. There was no first wave or second wave hitting the...
Alright, I don't know how else to explain this. Maybe this is not the best example, but when I think of US military, I think of like a serial killer. Now, ignore the morality behind it. Think of like as a human. You and I just walk around. Maybe we can punch somebody. Maybe we can hurt somebody. But as a human, we will never really harm somebody in that way. While a serial killer, methodical, serious, like dead stare, right? This is just Tuesday for that person. You know that all those movies where like a serial killer is in the room and it becomes this thriller horror movie. It's a human. It's not a ghost. But still becomes a thriller because that person is not just a person, that's a serial killer. Killing is very easy to that person and it's very methodical. That's what I think of when I think of US military. Because everything is mathematics, everything is methodical, everything is laid out plan already. They already know how in group, in which logistical way to work and how to get the job done. And the job will be done because it's how science works. Right? In science, when people talk about, oh, we're probably going to discover this kind of a thing in this particle accelerator by tomorrow. And they do, because probability was already high. That's how American military works. How the fuck you plan against that? How the fuck you going to fight that? The most powerful militaries on the planet would struggle against that. Iran is not the most powerful. Iran is not even in top 10. This is what I've been saying. Like, how do you fight against that? There was no chance in hell Iran could have done anything to, save any of these things. Yeah, this was going to get destroyed because domino already started to fall.
The port. There was only a single impact point in physical space, generating a thermal shock that made the structural integrity of the targets a mathematical impossibility. The outcome at the naval base isn't defined as a naval victory. You can't call it a battle when the adversary's capacity to resist is mathematically zero. It was an erasure. Optical remote sensing data from Planet Labs returned a cold battle damage assessment. The water surface stained with carbon residue, dry dock structures pulverized. U.S. Central Command confirmed 17 core surface platforms of the Iranian Navy were completely neutralized. The conventional surface force was wiped out before the internal combustion cycles of their engines could even turn over. The entire fleet had locked itself into a basic geometric error right at the pier. The exquisite platform doctrine collapsed pathetically against the law of conservation of energy. The 133,000 short-ton ESBIRIS Macron had its superstructure completely sheared off, reduced to a mass of uncontrolled secondary fires at the southern pier, permanently severing their blue water capability. The UAV carrier IRIS Shahid Bagheri took a direct kinetic impulse, permanently lost buoyancy, and sank right at her mooring. Even the underwater stealth assassins, the Kilo-class diesel electrics, suffered total thermal deformation, baked alive inside their bone-dry docks. And when the hull structure of the Jamarin-class frigate ruptured and sank at Chabahar, the A2AD anti-access network was officially broken. The system broadcasted one absolute parameter: math beats mass.
As a physics guy, not really. E equals mc squared, energy mass is same thing, nothing beats mass. But math has more precise mass behind it, let's just say it like that.
If you believe in the absolute supremacy of American engineering and the unwavering discipline of the men and women who execute it, type PROUD in the comments below and hit subscribe to synchronize your data, because when the smoke clears and you step back to look at the multi-domain beast we just spooled up, the reality becomes undeniable. The talking heads call this a simple airstrike. They were dead wrong. This was a masterclass in American industrial dominance.
Simple airstrike. It's like those fighter pilots just woke up, ate a biscuit, like wiped off the crumbs and just took a plane and just like did their thing. Yeah, that's easy. It's simple. It doesn't have a million tons shit of like paperwork and planning behind it with the insane amount of command centers and all the details behind it, right? All the synchronized steps that every other thing will take, not just these bombers.
But let's be absolutely clear. Algorithms don't protect a nation. The men and women of the United States Armed Forces do. There is no networked lethality without the American intellect that designed it and the quiet, resolute dedication of the operators on the line. Every single subsystem, from the silent cyber operations in orbit to the electromagnetic storms clearing the skies, was held together by the steady hands of our sailors, pilots, and engineers. It takes an absolute mastery of the craft to orchestrate thousands of tons of payload across entirely disjointed spatial vectors.
Especially the people on top of the aircraft carrier. When shit goes down, it's a storm. They still have to do their job while waves are flying. The carrier is going up and down. All the what is it called? Green water is splashing around. They still have to do their thing.
It takes a relentless human spirit to force completely out-of-phase altitudes and airspeeds to perfectly converge on a single grid at the exact same millisecond. That isn't just the cold math of physics. That is the ultimate, unapologetic footprint of American resolve. And when our people fully integrate that level of brilliance with that level of discipline, American overmatch is no longer just a theory. It becomes a mathematical guarantee.
America, richest country, money as an incentive, democratic, first modern democracy where most democracies today is based on. Freedom, you can do shit. Freedom at a governmental military level where innovations are encouraged. All three combined, of course it turns out to be the most powerful. This is common sense. It's not like, how did America work? Oh gee, I wonder how. Right? When these conditions align, yeah, it's gonna work. Why would it not? It's a boof. Why not? Yeah, alright, well there you go. Why the US Navy needed time on I like this channel. The ways, mathematically he makes scripts and everything is awesome. Time on target to erase Iran's fleet. By the channel Navy Decoded. If you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe and I'll see you next time.